Hi, my name is Elizabeth Moreira. I'm running for California District 38, and this is my domestic policy gauntlet. I'd first like to talk about Medicare for All. Medicare for All, universal health care, socialized medicine, it doesn't matter which name you associate with this policy. It is desperately needed and one of my absolutely top platforms and missions when elected into office. Here's some important statistics. A third of working class Americans have some form of medical debt. 2/3 of all bankruptcies list medical debt as the primary cause. And the average person spends about $11,500 annually on healthcare. That's 3.8 trillion nationally and 44% higher than Switzerland, which is the next highest per capita in health spending. We stand almost entirely alone in the list of developed nations that do not offer universal health care for our people. We even pay for countries like Israel to have socialized medicine, but not our own people. Some would argue that we pay for the quality we receive. Unfortunately, though, according to the WHO, the United States is not even in the top 10 of countries who have the best or most advanced healthcare in the world. As a matter of fact, 10 countries that are on that list, they provide socialized medicine for their people. So where did we rank? We ranked dead last in healthcare for developed nations in access to care, into the care process, efficiency of care, quality of care, equity of care, and the healthcare outcome. Dead last. So explain to me why we pay more than any other country in the world and provide the worst coverage for our people. Why don't we have socialized medicine? Because there's a lot of dark money in politics, and 2/3 of Congress, such as my current incumbent in the district, receive the bulk of their funding from industries like healthcare and big pharma. In 2020, Big Pharma spent $3.4 billion in lobbying, while the healthcare sector spent $623 million. It's pretty clear why we don't have socialized medicine, and it's one of my personal goals to get rid of this dark money in Congress so that we can make way for policies like Medicare for All to help people in this country. Strengthening the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act, or CWA, was an enormously progressive piece of legislation for its time. It was passed in 1972 after multiple river fires in polluted waters caught public attention. Since then, we've learned so much more about the way we directly impact our waterways and residential areas. The Clean Water Act was a great way to regulate water that directly flows into the ocean, but it didn't really regulate residential drinking water or groundwater. In April 2020, the Supreme Court actually ruled that groundwater is regulated by CWA, yet there's been little regulation in regard to contaminants of groundwater. Instead, multiple other acts are relied on to regulate groundwater and residential water contamination. Even today, the water crisis that happened in 2014 with Flint, Michigan is still being investigated because of overwhelming amount of neglect and willful disinformation provided to residents. In this situation, the state was able to change an entire city's water source without proper treatment, oversight, or input from its residents. Because of this, many became fatally ill or suffered from long-term damage due to lead poisoning. Although the state and Department of Environmental Quality had taken a look at the situation, they failed to do the bare minimum of properly testing the water to protect its residents. Another major issue we need to consider is groundwater contamination caused by fracking. Both land and offshore fracking is a process that should be entirely banned. As we've seen with oil spills in the ocean or cracked pipe contaminants leading into drinking water, this is a practice that is highly toxic and unstable. This does not just jeopardize our waters and people, but leads to an increase in seismic activity and potential threats to the stability of our land itself. Currently, oil companies legally dump around 900 million gallons of toxic waste into the ocean each year due to our current regulations. Not only do we need stronger restrictions for waste, but eliminating our dependence on fossil fuels entirely would immensely aid in strengthening the Clean Water Act and help bring back resources for groundwater and for residential drinking. I'd now like to discuss ICE and immigration. I first want to start off by saying that ICE should absolutely be abolished. ICE is overfunded and underregulated. It is an agency that was created to perform duties that other agencies already oversaw and essentially holds no true original purpose. Between USCIS, Border Patrol, and ICE, we've created multiple systems of hardships and heartache for immigrants just looking to pursue a better life. We are wasting around $8 billion each year on force that terrorizes, detains, and criminalizes immigrants. They separate families, put children on trial, and maintain facilities of poor sanitation, overcrowding, and disease. They keep people in facilities at a rate of $134 a night. That's more than many high-quality hotels. Our current immigration system displays a message to the world that we create and support inhumane systems and persecute those who are from specific origins. Yet, if any other country treated our people this way, when we entered, we would be at war. One of the biggest issues is Section 287G, which allows ICE agents to expand jurisdiction past the border and patrol cities, enter homes, and work with police stations to pick up immigrant detainees before they are ever even sent to trial or convicted of a crime. The worst part is that this system literally solves nothing. Force and intimidation are not the answers to mass migration or illegal immigration. To start, we are one of the top 5 most difficult countries to obtain citizenship. Our system is difficult to navigate, it can be extremely expensive, and it takes a very long time, which means a long time before people can actually work legally and make money for their families. We need to make our resident process easier to obtain and more affordable to dissuade illegal attempts at crossing and unnecessary death. Further, we need to take that $8 billion and start investing in addressing the root cause of mass migration, such as devastating climate change, like we've seen in Haiti, war-torn areas like Syria, or gang violence, displacement, and drug trafficking. For one moment, we need to stop thinking about keeping people out and start thinking about the overwhelming desperation we would have to face ourselves to leave everything and everyone behind and try to start a new life somewhere. That's where we need to start, placing our resources in investigating the root cause and eliminate overcrowded, inhumane systems like ICE. Amnesty. Not one of us, save Native Americans, are here without our ancestors immigrating here. What makes citizens today better than those who wish to be citizens tomorrow? I am 100% in favor of amnesty for undocumented workers, students, and individuals wanting to become a citizen. As I previously mentioned, our immigration system is a joke. My husband is a Portuguese immigrant, and when we met, we were living in separate countries. So I have firsthand experience in navigating our pathway to citizenship. And I can tell you that the way this country treats outsiders is discriminatory and appalling. Even when trying to enter legally, the wait is long. It took my husband a year from when he applied to obtain his green card. Without that, he couldn't receive a work authorization or a license. In his country, he was a skilled carpenter. And then here, that meant nothing because his references and experiences were not recognized by employers in the United States. In the real world, we have to work to support ourselves and our families. Because of this, many generations have found and created loopholes that allow them to work or enter our country without all the red tape. They've created a life here. They've had children, pay taxes, contribute to their communities and the economy, yet we do not see them as worth citizenship or equal in society because of how they or their families have entered this country. To be honest, with the way we treat our citizens here, I honestly wonder why they would even want to live here. Either way, we absolutely need to grant amnesty to those who have created a life in our country or wish to do so. And we need to make it easier for those who want to be a citizen in the United States. Should Roe versus Wade be a federal law? Absolutely. We should have codified this decades ago. Plainly put, this conversation needs to end. Period. I am at the point of disgusted that the topic of women's bodies is so often in the mouth of people it doesn't affect, especially men, and typically older white men. They cannot understand this difficult choice because they will never have to be put in the position to make this difficult choice. This is simple. My body, my choice, her body, her choice. Not a single man or other person should have a say in what any woman does with their own body. I also find it completely ironic that all these pro-life warrior politicians out there want to shame women or force them into having a child they're either not ready for, can't support, or have conceived through a traumatic event. Yet these same politicians are usually pro-war, pro-death penalty, and oppose bills that would make it easier to have children or provide more financial resources for families. As for the religious aspects some want to use behind this and what their book says, one, separation of church and state has been fine-lined to non-existent in our country. We force religion on our money, pledge, schools, politics, and now on people's bodies. I'd say enough is enough. We represent a diverse country that should be home to religious freedoms, yet we see that a particular freedom is only extended to those of a single faith. They should probably take another look at that book, because in the Bible, not once does it mention abortion. Not only that, there is a Mosaic law clearly stating that miscarriage does not involve the death of a human being. How about the story of the creation of Adam, when he breathed life into his nostrils and then became a man and a living soul? Texas has created an unconstitutional bill that treats women's bodies once again like property to be controlled by the government. Here are some facts maybe that Texas should have considered instead of forcing rape victims to bear the children of their attacker. In Texas in 2020, there were over 30,000 children in foster care. 30,000. 64,000 CPS cases were open, and 251 kids were killed due to domestic abuse. Each year, the number of children in foster care is higher than the previous year. Texas is not an exception. The foster care system there is actually privatized. This means that foster children are literally a form of profit. Sadly, more states are looking to follow this method. Look, just leave people alone. Be a decent person. Their decisions do not impact your life directly. Leave them alone. Don't butt in. No one cares about your moral objection. Just leave people alone. Women can make the decisions that are best for their body and their future. I'd last like to discuss saving the United States Post Office and public banking. The United States Post Office has seen its share of financial burdens over the last decade. In 2006, the Postal Accountability and Enforcement Act was passed, and this required the Postal Service to pre-fund future retiree health benefits. The law put a financial strain on USPS, and it began to default on these prepayments in order to pay its current employees. Prior to passing this bill, the USPS was on a pay-as-you-go approach. Many confuse this with the prepayment of pension that most other companies pay into. One, we're talking about healthcare, not pensions. And two, in one go at a time, the USPS was required to pay 10 years of future benefits, which is roughly $5 million in reserve for those future payments up to 70 years in advance. The House actually voted on HR 2382 last year to remove this requirement. So why is this still a discussion? Because this is another perfect example of how legislation dies in the Senate. Since the House passed this in February of 2020, the Senate has not so much as even proposed an update or even a pushback. Now, to be clear, ending this requirement alone will not solve the financial issues of USPS. There is an enormous range of competitors. It costs much more than the price of postage to get a letter from point A to point B. And because of this, they need an increased revenue stream. Currently, the USPS has reestablished public banking in some centers on the East Coast. I fully support USPS public banking and providing banking service, especially in rural areas. They actually used to provide public banking services up until 1967. Some will say that they stopped because they were only aiding in small transactions, which didn't create enough revenue. The truth is, however, that large banks were already well established in 1967 and helped give money into policies, again, that dark money in Congress. So the government passed legislation that required the post office to stop collecting deposits and to transfer all of its remaining deposits into the U.S. Treasury. This was about $50 million then, which would be equivalent to about $410 million today. USPS has picked the perfect timing to reintroduce this service. People are at a point where they have lost trust in larger corporate banks and they're exhausted of fees, or simply don't live close enough to a bank to be able to use one. Reestablishing a banking service will not alone, again, save the USPS, but it is a small step towards stability and should be fully supported alongside the removal of the 2006 healthcare prepay requirement.